Before the arrival of Europeans, North America was inhabited by diverse Native American cultures, each with unique languages, religions, and governance systems. The indigenous peoples had been living on the continent for thousands of years. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, sponsored by Spain, sailed across the Atlantic in search of a westward route to Asia but instead reached the Caribbean. This marked the beginning of European exploration. In the decades that followed, various European nations began to establish footholds in the Americas. Spanish explorers, like Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizarro, claimed large portions of the Americas for Spain, including parts of what are now Mexico and South America. The French, led by figures such as Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain, established colonies in the north, notably in Canada. The English and Dutch also began to explore and claim land. The English colonies, 1607 to 1775. The first successful English settlement in North America was founded in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1607. Over the next century, English settlers established a series of colonies along the East Coast. These colonies were largely based on agriculture, with crops like tobacco and cotton becoming staples of the Southern economy. In the North, colonies like Massachusetts developed economies based more on trade, fishing, and later, industry. By the mid-1700s, tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain had begun to rise. British taxation policies, such as the Stamp Act, 1765, and the Tea Act, 1773, angered the colonists, who had no representation in the British Parliament. The slogan "No taxation without representation" became a rallying cry for those pushing for independence. The American Revolution, 1775 to 1783, the friction between the American colonies and Britain erupted into open conflict in April 1775, when British troops clashed with colonial militias at Lexington and Concord. The colonies, under the leadership of figures such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin, declared their independence from Britain in 1776 with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The Revolutionary War lasted until 1783 and was fought on multiple fronts, with the colonies receiving crucial support from France, which feared British dominance. The war ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which recognized the sovereignty of the United States. The early Republic and the Constitution, 1783 to 1812. After independence, the new United States faced the challenge of creating a functioning government. The Articles of Confederation, the first attempt at a national government, were ineffective due to their weak central authority. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was drafted at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, creating a federal system with three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, was added in 1791 to ensure protection for individual liberties. George Washington became the first president of the United States in 1789, setting many precedents for the office, including the establishment of a 2-term limit. Expansion and conflict, 1812 to 1860. The United States began expanding westward, driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that Americans were destined to spread across the continent. This led to the acquisition of vast territories, such as the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, which doubled the size of the country. However, expansion led to conflict, particularly over the issue of slavery. The North, where slavery was largely abolished, and the South, where slavery was integral to the economy, became increasingly divided. The debate over whether new states would allow slavery or not intensified. In 1812, the U.S. fought the War of 1812 against Britain, which was interfering with American trade. The war ended in a stalemate, but it fostered a sense of national pride. The Civil War, 1861 to 1865. By the 1860s, tensions between the North and South reached a breaking point over slavery and states' rights. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, leading Southern states to secede from the Union. In 1861, the Confederacy was formed, and the Civil War began. The war was a turning point in American history. It was a bloody conflict that resulted in over 600,000 deaths, but it also ended slavery in the United States. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were free. The war ended in 1865 with the defeat of the Confederacy. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, formally abolishing slavery. Reconstruction efforts to rebuild the South and integrate formerly enslaved people into society faced many challenges. Industrialization and the Gilded Age, 1865 to 1900. In the late 19th century, the United States underwent rapid industrialization. The country became a global economic power, with innovations such as the railroad, telegraph, and electricity fueling growth. However, this period also saw the rise of powerful industrialists like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, whose monopolies led to public outrage and calls for reform. This era was marked by stark inequality. While industrialists amassed vast fortunes, many workers faced harsh conditions in factories. The Gilded Age was also a time of great political corruption, though it was followed by the Progressive Era, which brought social reforms, including women's suffrage and the fight against corruption. The Progressive Era and World Wars, 1900 to 1945. The early 20th century was marked by a wave of progressive reforms aimed at addressing the problems caused by industrialization. The 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote, was passed in 1920. Workers gained more rights through labor unions and legislation, including minimum wage laws. The U.S. emerged as a global power during World War I, 1914 to 1918, although it initially remained neutral. After the war, President Woodrow Wilson proposed the League of Nations, but the U.S. did not join, preferring isolationism. In the 1930s, the U.S. was hit by the Great Depression, a severe economic downturn that lasted throughout much of the decade. President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded with a New Deal, a series of programs aimed at relief, recovery, and reform. The U.S. also entered World War II after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, and the war ended in 1945 with the Allies' victory. Cold War and Civil Rights, 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the U.S. entered into the Cold War with the Soviet Union, a period of tension and competition between the two superpowers. The Cold War included proxy wars, the threat of nuclear conflict, and ideological battles between capitalism and communism. The U.S. was involved in the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, and the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, as part of its efforts to contain communism. At the same time, the U.S. underwent significant social changes. The Civil Rights Movement, led by figures such as Martin Luther King Jr., sought to end segregation and ensure equal rights for African Americans. Major legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 helped dismantle institutional racism. Modern America, 1991-present. After the Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States emerged as the sole global superpower. The 1990s were marked by economic prosperity, technological innovation, and the growth of the Internet. The 21st century began with the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, which led to the War on Terror, including the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The U.S. faced challenges like the 2008 financial crisis, which caused a global recession, but it also saw rapid advancements in technology, especially in areas like computing and social media. In recent years, political polarization and debates over issues like healthcare, immigration, and climate change have continued to shape the national